Hey guys, what's up? My name is Zach, and today we're doing a 2020 election prediction between Tulsi Gabbard and Donald Trump. So Tulsi Gabbard is a U.S. House representative from the state of Hawaii. She's known for her progressive views and her public support of Bernie Sanders during the 2016 presidential race, and today we're going to be seeing how she would do in a presidential election between herself and Donald Trump. So overall, I think that she'd be a pretty formidable candidate for the Democrats to run. This really comes down to her minority appeal. She is Hindu, and she's also quite young for a Democratic contender. And she also comes from a military background, which would be very effective for the Democrats to run. I think they would do very well running someone with a military background, especially in 2020 against Donald Trump. But some obstacles that she would have to overcome is lack of name recognition and lack of experience. She's only been a House representative and hasn't really gotten her name out there, as well as someone like Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden has. So that would be an obstacle for her. But let's just get right into the not solid states. All right, so New Hampshire and Maine's 2 electoral votes I would both consider to be likely in Tulsi Gabbard's column, and this is really the same reasons I keep giving in just about every single video at this point. Solid Democratic base, and I do think that Bernie Sanders' endorsement, which I'm almost 100% certain that he would endorse her if she was the candidate, would go very far in the Northeast. So both these areas likely in Tulsi Gabbard's column. Virginia I'd also consider to be likely in Tulsi Gabbard's column, just for the same reason it's likely in almost any other Democrats' column. It's just got a solid Democratic base, and Tulsi Gabbard can absolutely turn out minorities and African Americans, and I think she would have strong appeal to all minorities alike, just because I think she stands for minorities overall. New Mexico and Colorado both considered to be likely in our column. Again, virtually for the same reasons, that would be likely in almost any other Democrats' column. Just solid Democratic basis in both these states. And in Colorado especially, Bernie Sanders' endorsement would go a pretty decent way. And I don't think that Tulsi Gabbard has I think it's a long shot that she would lose either of these states. Now going to Texas and Georgia, I think that Tulsi Gabbard would campaign very well in both these states, arguably better than most other Democrats, but still, even then, I think that's a long shot for either of these states to flip or to become anything other than likely. So, yeah, I'd leave them both likely in Donald Trump's column. I do think that she would have significant appeal to minorities, both Hispanics and African Americans alike, but I don't think they'll go far enough to flip either of these states into our column. Going up to Minnesota, I think that this would be likely in our column. Although she is progressive, I would not consider it to be solidly in her column, and this is mostly because of her lack of name recognition. However, I do think that if she was to get her name out there more so than she has so far, then this state would shift. A number of other states would shift, like Virginia, like New Mexico and Colorado. Those states would shift from likely to solid if she were to get her name out there a lot better. But currently, that's not the case, so I'm going to call that Minnesota and the other states you see on the electoral map likely in her column. Going over to Nevada, considered this state to be likely in her column, and this is mostly because of her strong appeal to minorities, as I said before, and Donald Trump has a very low approval in this state, and I think she would absolutely be able to take that into her advantage, and overall I think she'd have strong appeal to Nevada voters in general. Now going over to Michigan and Wisconsin, this may be a bit early for both these states to go, but I do think she would take the Rust Belt pretty solidly overall, and this is mostly because I think, like I said, military background is absolutely great if you're campaigning in the Rust Belt, and Tulsi Gabbard definitely has that going for her. I think, unlike Hillary Clinton, she would have very strong women's appeal, and the main thing that separates her from Hillary Clinton is I think that she's much more likable. She doesn't have any major scandals. If you guys have heard her speak on YouTube or during her speeches at all, she's a very good speaker, and I think women would absolutely rally behind her overall, and I think that'd be the case for the Rust Belt in particular. Now going over to Pennsylvania, I would probably call this likely in Tulsi Gabbard's column, making her the hypothetical next president of the United States before we've even gotten the leans. And this state would go in her column mostly because I think that she would appeal very strongly, not just to the urban areas. And I've said this before in my past videos. If you're a Democrat, you cannot just focus on urban areas. And that's just a rule if you're a Democrat in general. If you just focus on urban areas in states like Pennsylvania, like Michigan, like Minnesota, you will lose those states. But I think that, and that was the case for Hillary Clinton for the most part, and why she lost Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and other states as well. But for Tulsi Gabbard, I think she would absolutely have turnout in urban areas, and I think she would also have turnout in the more in the more Rust Belt and more suburban areas is the word I'm looking for in Pennsylvania, and this is really the same reason why she would win the rest of the Rust Belt so solidly, because of her military background, because of her strong appeal to Rust Belt voters overall, and I think that would go a long way in general, and I think that would absolutely be the case for urban areas, for the suburban areas in Pennsylvania. I think she'd have a difficult time campaigning in rural areas of Pennsylvania, but I think that if you're a Democrat, you really just need the urban areas and the suburban areas in order to take the state, and that'd be the case for Tulsi Gabbard. Now moving over to leans, I would consider Maine's second to be leaning blue, and I think there's a number of factors when calling this district lean blue. One, Bernie Sanders' endorsement would go a long way in this district, and her military background would also go a very long way if she's campaigning in this district. Just because the main reason why I went to Trump is because it's predominantly pro-gun, but I think that if they saw someone who has military background on the ticket, this district would go into her column. I think that's the case for almost anyone with military background. Now going over to North Carolina, I would call this state narrowly in Trump's column. I do think that Tulsi Gabbard will have significant amount of appeal to suburban voters and African Americans, and I think that it will become very narrow in this state. But however, Donald Trump's approval has been going up in this state overall, and I don't think she'd have a very good time at appealing to moderate Republicans since she is a progressive. The main exception for progressive appeal, I think, overall, is the South. The South generally does not do too well when it comes to progressives, just because a number of them just generalize progressives as socialists, and that'd be the case for North Carolina. A number of moderate Republicans who maybe don't support Trump will vote for Trump regardless, just because they see Tulsi Gabbard as a socialist because she is a progressive, which isn't the same thing. If you guys have watched my debate, I made that very, very clear. But going over to Nebraska's second and Iowa, I would call both of them leaning in Trump's column, and virtually for the same reasons I would call North Carolina leaning in Trump's column. I think that a number of moderate Republicans would not vote for Tulsi Gabbard. I think that her appeal would not go as far to a significant number of moderate Republicans, and I think that both Nebraska's second and Iowa are made up predominantly of moderate Republicans, but Iowa's a bit of a different case. It's mainly made up of farmers, whereas Nebraska's second is just the city of Omaha, and I don't think that Tulsi Gabbard would have a good time appealing to the farming vote in this state, and I do think that Trump would take it. Going down to Florida, I do believe that this state would go leaning in Tulsi Gabbard's column, and this comes down to a number of factors. Her military experience, her youth, I think, would be a very positive factor for her. Just across the United States in general, her youth would do very well, especially when turning out millennial voters to her side, and that'd definitely be the case for a state like Florida. Her minority appeal would also be a big factor, particularly in the urban areas, and I think she would win the state mainly by turning out voters in the urban areas such as Miami, Orlando, Tallahassee, maybe Jacksonville. I think that'd be the main factors, which is why this state would go in her column. Arizona, I think this state would be very narrow, and this is because, again, her military background would go a very long way in a state like Arizona, and I think she'd poll over a number of moderate Republicans for that reason. However, I'm going to call it lean red, and this is mostly because of the same negative factor that I've been repeating throughout the video. She does not have a significant number of moderate Republican appeal despite her military background, especially in Arizona where they have a strong resentment towards progressives, as I discussed in my Cynthia Nixon versus Donald Trump video from yesterday. And I think that'd be the case for Tulsi Gabbard. I think she would definitely do better than Cynthia Nixon would in an election, if you guys watched my Cynthia Nixon video yesterday. But I do think that the state would go to Donald Trump just because progressives really are not ready to campaign in statewide races in Arizona, considering that's still starting to trend blue and isn't really completely out of the red zone yet. Now going over to Ohio, which I would consider to be the toughest state to call, I would call this state leaning in Tulsi Gabbard's column. And this is mainly because despite the strong numbers of moderate Republicans in this state, I think that'd be the main factor, which is why it'd be so competitive, because moderate Republicans would most likely be split down the middle between moderate Republicans who would not vote for her because she's a progressive, and between moderate Republicans who would vote for her because of her military background. But I think that in the end, the moderate Republicans would most likely vote for her due to her military background, and she would also get a number of the youth vote and the millennial vote as a result of her youth, and minority turnout, I guess, would be somewhat of a factor in the state, although not too big. And for all those reasons, I would consider this state to be leaning in Tulsi Gabbard's column. Alright, so this is the election prediction. There isn't a lot of ways for Trump to win in this scenario. He could take Ohio and he could take Florida, but both of those things happening together are very unlikely, and even if he does, Tulsi Gabbard still wins, as you can see by the likely margin here. The only pathway I can see for Trump to winning is if he wins Ohio, Florida, and Pennsylvania, and then I think that only then it would be in his column. Maybe not even then. Overall, I think that Tulsi Gabbard, as you can see with 326 electoral votes, which is more than what I give to most other Democratic nominees, would be a very, very good candidate for the Democrats to run. Whether or not this is the year for her to run is up for debate. I think it'd be smarter for her to wait maybe an election cycle or two before she runs for president, and this is mostly because she could run for higher offices, maybe a Hawaii senator or governor of Hawaii, which would get her name out a lot better and would allow her to run on a pretty solid platform for president in a few more election cycles. However, even if she were to run now, as you can see here, she would do very, very well with 326 electoral votes. This is mainly because, as I said throughout the video, she is youthful, she has minority support, and overall I think she's a very, very likable overall. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a like, share, subscribe. It's the only way for small channels like mine to continue to grow. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you would like to see more videos like this, or any videos you'd like to see in general, please leave a comment down below, and I'll put it on my list if I like it. Hope you guys have a good day. See ya.